of the Operations Committee for, thank you.
Mr. Martinez?
Here.
Mr. Rodriguez Pina? Here. Mr. Gonzalez? Mr. Meyer?
Present.
Mr. Pago? Mr. Vasquez? Chair Gutierrez? Vice Chair Ferre?
Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Thank you very much.
Also joining us is Mr. Walters.
And our board member, who is also here today, thank you very much for your presence, and we would appreciate any input you have on any of the matters today.
Mr. Vasquez.
And may the record show that Mr. Vasquez is arriving as we speak. Vasquez is in the house. Thank you. Carlos, if you'd like to start with the agenda, please.
Yeah. Do any members of this committee have any conflicts they want to report? Seeing none, we move forward.
I also asked to enter into the record that Mr. Alfredo Gonzalez is also joining us this morning. Good morning, Mr. Gonzalez. And if you'd like to ask counsel him as well to make sure.
Mr. Gonzalez, do you have any conflicts you'd like to report? Okay.
Any public comments today? The floor is open for any public comments. I see council. Has anyone presented themselves that they wish to have any public comments today?
No.
Next item, council.
Operation and action items. A, approval of summary minutes. Operations Committee meeting on May 12th, 2015.
Wish to move those into, moved by Chair Gutierrez, seconded by Vice Chair Rodriguez Pina. Does anyone wish to make any amendments or changes to the minutes? Hearing none, does anyone stand in opposition to accepting the minutes as they are? Hearing none, minutes are entered into the record and accepted. Go on, counsel.
Item B, MDX procurement contract, ITB-1503. MDX work program 87404.060. Construction services for roadway improvements for Southwest 104th Street, Killian Parkway, from east of Southwest 112th Avenue to West 107th Court. Engineer's estimate, $951,782.37. Mr. Chair, there's two different things that we'll vote on. The first is staff to enter into negotiations with the sole responsibility, Halley Engineering Contractors, Inc., to reduce the submitted bid amount to an amount equal to or lesser than the engineer's estimate, and if successful, enter into the contract. And number two, if negotiations with the sole responsibility or bidder are not successful, cancel the procurement and re-advertise the project.
Very good. I also like to recognize that board member Jose Pepe Cancios has joined us today. Thank you, Mr. Cancios. Good morning. Who will be presenting Mr. Rodriguez for staff?
Helen, procurement manager.
Good morning, Helen.
Good morning. Thank you, sir. We released excuse me, an invitation to bid for ITB 1503. We received 3 bids from H&H Asphalt Inc., H&R Paving Inc., and Halley Engineering Contractors. The 2 lowest bidders were non-responsive because they were not able to meet the small business participation requirement that was required in the ITV. The 3rd bidder, he's responsive, but his bid is higher than our engineer's estimate. So what staff is recommending to committee is to allow us to negotiate with that responsive bidder to bring his price down to, at the very least, the engineer's estimate. And if we're not successful, then to go ahead and cancel this procurement and go out and re-advertise it with a lower small business participation requirement. We had a 50% participation requirement in this contract, which we still feel is doable. But in order, because this is the second time that this project comes before you, in order to move it forward, we will reduce the small business participation requirement if we needed to go that route.
Okay. Does anyone from the committee have any questions on this item? Let's start with Mr. Meyer and then Mr. Rodriguez-Pina.
From a staff perspective, we're $200,000 difference. What's the expectation that we're going to drive to in negotiations?
We're going to ask.
We're going to try.
We'll try.
That's all we can do is try.
Exactly.
I think we owe it to the toll payer.
No, most definitely. Is there any expectation
I will say this, Board Member Meyer, in the past, this is not new, it's not unique. We've done it in the past with other contracts. I remember vividly the asset maintenance contract where the responsive bidder was above the engineer's estimate, and we sat down and negotiated, and they came down to the number and performed extremely well. So we'll try it. The issue with this contract, the issue with this construction, is that because it's right in front of Miami-Dade College's entrance, we've had to schedule it for the summer months. So the invitation to bid has to be timed so that the construction occurs in the summer months. And like we've said, this is the second time. I wish that the contractors would have met our requirement for small business. We believe, we've analyzed, we've seen the subcontracting industry, and we believe that it should be achievable. We don't understand why it isn't achievable. With that said, it's not a project that I would recommend, that it's desperately needed, that I would pay above the engineer's estimate. And that's why the recommendation is the way it is.
Thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez-Pina and then Mr. Vasquez.
Yeah, pretty much you answered most of my questions, but the time sensitivity of this, Helen, it's not a time-sensitive factor.
If Mr. Rodriguez-Pina, if we don't negotiate with the responsive bidder, then we, like we were stating, we would like to cancel the procurement and re-advertise it, and we would re-advertise it so that construction would occur next summer. So we will just move it to the next summer season.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Rodriguez-Pina?
Yep, wanted to follow up. I guess, so you'll go back and try to negotiate. If they don't come down to that, you will have the unilateral decision, just basically say no, right?
Right, that's what we're asking
We're
the
approving
board
today.
for approval.
Okay,
Correct.
all right. Thank you.
Mr. Vasquez.
So just so that I understand, one had a mathematical error.
Yes.
Another had a compliance issue.
Well, both of them, two had compliance issues. Out of those two, one also had a mathematical error where they didn't extend the numbers correctly.
And do we have any idea, because again, going back to Mr. Meyer's comment, it seemed like 2 out of the 3 were in very close proximity, and then you have a big variation. Any indication as to those things are usually not red flags, but they're kind of like they jump out at you. Any idea why that pattern?
No. I mean, they obviously they had different items that they bid in a different way, but nothing that jumps out as inconsistent.
Okay. That was my question.
Fine. Chair Gutierrez.
Thank you. I didn't notice, but I do have a conflict on this, and I'm filling out the paperwork, but I do have a couple of questions. Is the third respondent, they were able to comply with the 50% small business?
Yes.
Okay. So it is something that is achievable?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Very good.
Helen?
Yes.
I have a question.
Mr. Gonzalez, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
In regards to H&R paving, when I looked at this, it says that they had the signalization items were lower, but at least maybe I missed it, but I didn't see how that it said that they didn't comply with that 15%. I'm assuming they also did not comply with that 15%.
Agenda item report addresses the compliance issues. I think that what you're looking at is the bid analysis done by our GC, which is most focused on the bid.
Thank you.
Any other questions from either board members who are present or any of the members of the subcommittee? Or the committee, excuse me. Here now, I have a question. We only got, normally it's very unusual for us to go forward with a contract when 2 of the 3 people that bid were held non-responsive. We usually have a tendency to want to have competition with those who are qualified. My understanding is, though, Ms. Cordero, is this is the second time we have done this, so there's no anticipation that if we simply don't rebid that there's going to be a dramatic difference in the bidding in the future. Is that a fair assessment why you're making that recommendation today?
That is a fair assessment.
Is that correct, Mr. Director?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Rodriguez-Pina.
the difference really that from the estimate and with the bid is $120,000. That's really what we're negotiating.
Yes.
Okay, just to make sure, because I thought I heard somebody say $200,000. But the consequences, and you bring up a good point, Mr. Chairman, that if we delay this by another year, will the cost increase neutralize this. And I mean, it's a policy issue that we kind of feel that the decision we make today is going to set some precedents. Meaning, if we don't negotiate this and we say, yeah, okay, let's move forward with this only bidder, and it seems like a tactic that could be used down the road. And I just wanted to put that for the record. I'll leave it. I don't want to belabor this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Does anyone wish to move the item in? I need someone to move it. Moved by Mr. Vasquez, seconded by Mr. Meyer. We've had discussion on this item, so the discussion is closed. Now, Council, we need to vote on two separate items or just one? How do we need to do this just to make sure we do
Yes, I think that would be the correct way to handle it.
Okay. So what is the first item you're requesting that we do, Mr. Council?
To move into negotiations with Halley Contractors, Inc. for the engineer's estimate amount. And if they're not successful, then we move on to the second one.
Will we need someone to move the second one in and second it again, or was Mr. Vasquez and Mr. Meyer can move both into the items?
I think to be safe, we do it both ways.
I'm confused.
So am I.
What is the second item?
The second item would be if negotiations with Halley are not successful, cancel the procurement and re-advertise the project.
So then all there is just a need for one.
Well, there really no, because if I understand correctly, if we only move one, then we would have to accept their price and we could move forward with that. This way, if they're not successful in renegotiating, we're just going to start the process all over again.
There's two items here. The first one is accept that the sole responsive bidder is Halley Contractors, Inc., and that's number one, and allow us to enter into negotiations for an amount equal or lesser than the engineer's estimate. If successful, enter into a contract. That's one item. The second thing to bid on it is if we're not successful, then cancel the procurement and re-procure it. That's
so
why
it pre-authorizes the cancellation in the event.
Correct. If you don't, exactly.
All right. Let me ask. All right. It's been moved. It's been seconded. We've had negotiation. Any opposition to the item? Hearing no opposition, the item passes unanimously. Now, the second item, which we've discussed, is if negotiations with the sole responsive bidder are not successful, cancel the procurement and re-advertise. That's also been moved by Mr. Vasquez, seconded by Mr. Meyer. We've had an extensive discussion on the item as well. I will close discussion. Is anyone in opposition to that item? Hearing no opposition to that item, the item passes as well unanimously, Council. The next action item on the agenda, please.
Item C, MDX Procurement Contract, RFP 16-02, General Engineering Consultant Services, Work Program Production, GECA. Approval to advertise a request for proposal.
And who is going to be doing the presentation on this? Mr. Toledo. Good morning, Mr. Toledo.
Good morning, Board Member Martinez. Good morning, committee members. The item before you is the approval to advertise GCA. Similar to GCB, it has the same scope. Before you in this package, what we provided for you is it's pretty much the same criteria that we have for the GCB procurement with the same proposed technical evaluation committee recommendations. We've had some comments that were brought up in the past board meeting related to this procurement, and so we bring this item in front of you so we can address some of those comments and get direction on how we want to procure this contract.
Yeah. If I can summarize for the committee, the scope of work for GECA and GCB is exactly the same as advertised. They're both dictated by task authorizations. We tend to give task authorizations to B that are more operations inclined, and we tend to give GECA task authorizations that are more work program, finance, support inclined. What we've put before you is exactly the same procurement, but there's three items that I believe are to be discussed or should be discussed, and I think that's in response to the comments that I heard at the GECB procurement. The first item is the makeup of the Technical Evaluation Committee. If you notice on page 2 of the agenda item report, we again show an oversight member. Well, actually, I'll leave the oversight aside. We show 3 members of MDX and 2 outside. So one of the questions is, do we want to maintain that makeup? Do we want to change that makeup? How does the board feel about that? That's one conversation item. The second one is the actual oversight. The last committee meeting, the last GEC presentation, we had board member, our treasurer, Rick Rodriguez-Pina, who was the member oversight. So the conversation is, should it remain as a board member oversight? Should it be the committee oversight, or should there be a hybrid? And that could be a discussion. The third item that I would like to put on the table is the annual cap. Our GECs have annual caps. We've done that so that we can split the work between the 2 consultants. One of the things that we would propose to this committee for consideration is not have the annual cap on GECA. And the reason I would say that is, number one, I think it would promote more competition in the industry, because at the end of the day, when you have an annual cap, they're going to look at it, they're going to look at a 5-year contract, what that cap is, and they're going to make their decisions and whether they want to compete or not. That's number one. Number two is that it allows the authority maximum flexibility on how to move the agency forward as far as task authorizations. Again, the reason we have 2 GECs was for conflict. I think that was the main principal reason. Miami is a town, MDX is a system that it's just not realistic to assume that if we hired a GEC and we told them, if you're my GEC, you cannot do work with anybody else. The reality is that we intersect with county, state, municipal contracts. Sometimes it presents conflicts. The 2 GECs have afforded us the ability to manage those conflicts. And I think these items for discussion today will, again, give us maximum flexibility, especially the cap, to manage the future program for MDX. And I put those things on the table for your consideration. Again, the agenda item report was prepared, identical to the last one. And I bring those items up as possible areas that you want to consider for changes. And this is the time to do it. Once it's advertised, once we start the process, I'm not an advocate of changing. And I'll just say that again for the record.
I'd like to thank staff for preparing all this stuff for us. I'm actually going to ask Mr. Rodriguez Pina, who was the oversight on the last one. You kind of brought some of this to the table when we talked about this at the board meeting, and you've seen some of the discussion items and the things that staff is suggesting. Is this in line with some of the stuff that had concerned you during the last meeting, and if you can give us a little bit of your input based on that, and then I'll defer to all the other members of the committee as well.
I think this definitely was lessons learned, and I think.
I'm sorry. I have been under Robert's rules. I need to call the question first, and then does somebody wish to move the item in so that we can discuss it at this point? It'll be moved by Mr. Gonzalez, seconded by Mr. Vasquez, and now question's been called, and now I open it up for discussion. So, Mr. Rodriguez-Pina again.
I think we definitely had some lessons learned. I think there's a lot of value in what we did before, and obviously not only the input that we got from our colleagues here on this board. This was a very discussed item. I think some of the suggestions, or the suggestions that the executive director is making are consistent with that. I think the competition aspect, is really one of the most important one, and I want to publicly say I think there should be no sense of entitlement or that I'm working for this dollar amount. I think that will truly bring out competition. You're going to earn what you bring value to this organization. It's not, well, you got a contract, you're entitled to it. And I think that is one of the key components, and I think it was resonated by everybody. At least I felt it was, and that will be something that we insisted on innovation. We added some components of bringing perspectives from these professionals, and I think we saw some of that. I think this competitive aspect will do that even further. So that the items that the executive director is making, I'm in support, and I think will bring great value. Regarding the evaluation process, to the will of this board. If the board feels that that committee should be a committee or an individual, that's a decision here. I will tell you, if you have 5 people in a room, you're going to get 5 different opinions, just for the record. So I think it opens itself to that. I think we, as a oversight member, you don't vote on that, and staff and these professionals do that, but then we have the ability to do that. So that would be my only comment regarding that aspect of the recommendations. But again, I think the will of the board and the board members here really should prevail, and whatever you all feel that needs to be done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Vasquez, and then Chair Gutierrez.
Thank you. With regards to the makeup of the Oversight Committee, of the Technical Evaluation Committee, and the makeup of Oversight, my gut tells me that unless there's a real reason that indicates that the system's not working the way we have it, I would suggest we keep it the way it is. With regards to the annual cap, I'm pro-competition, and I would fully support the elimination of the annual cap. One question, having served on as an oversight member, when items return to this board for the award of a contract, let's say like last time when we did B, in addition to the report of how each evaluation committee member scored, are we also privy to how staff scored or how staff judged the specific companies?
Yes, I think the tabulation sheet has everyone who's in the evaluation committee. The evaluation committee members and the table is presented to the board for consideration.
Okay, but does that include Helen, Marie? Does that include?
Well, Marie was a member of the technical evaluating committee. Helen doesn't review the proposals other than for compliance.
So other than those specific members, there are no additional.
And whoever reviews it, it doesn't score. The grade doesn't.
That was just a question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chair Gutierrez.
Thank you. First, I have to say thank you to Helen and your team. This was scheduled for January, and it was fast-tracked and brought forward in the summertime as requested. So I'm pleasantly impressed that we're able to do that. I have a couple of questions. First, when this bid goes out, is there any part of this procurement that allows or doesn't allow that the team that is responsive to this procurement is not working in GECB?
That is a requirement. They are not allowed to work on.
No. Okay.
The teams have to be
distinctively different.
Yes.
Okay. Does that mean all the subs too,
As
or
well.
is it just the prime?
Everyone, the entire team.
Everybody. It cannot mirror each other.
Correct.
Excellent. So then it becomes true competition. I think it's a very good idea to go in and lift the cap because it's being constrictive given the fact that we're looking to be more efficient as we move forward. And I don't see how that actually gives you any benefit at this time. I would like to see that we expand the tech into the oral presentations the way it was done priorly, that it came to the committee and the committee of a whole was basically an oversight, not just one board member. And the reason for that is it was done before, it was very efficient, we learned a lot, and it is so important, and I'll explain why. This particular contract, just as B, is an extension of staff. It is that important. These are the teams that are putting out there what MDX needs, what it doesn't need, everything that has to do with design, construction, the gamut. It's the extension. If we are isolated from it, it's shame on us that we miss the opportunity to go in and be part of it. Our vote won't count in terms of a weight in the evaluation, but it will count in the process of asking the right questions, because do not expect something different if you put out the same. Do not expect a different outcome. So for me, I like the process that it worked before, when we got to this point, that we got this contractor that has historically won the contract because they have been performing and they've done they do a great competition. But I think now that we're opening it up and it has a possibility of even being bigger, that it's that important that each and every one of us is part of what happens next.
Can you repeat the process, how it was?
The way we did it last time is that it went through the process of the scoring in terms of the next level, and then when it went back to orals, the entire board or the entire committee of ops sat and overviewed. And we also had a list of questions to ask that we asked all members. And of course, there are some questions that just arise by the sheer presentation that you must pose, so sometimes they are a little bit different. So, but that is very valuable, because remember, these are people that we don't get to see, but they are the face of MDX. So we need to be part of it.
Mr. Meyer.
Please excuse my ignorance here, but lifting the cap refers to what exactly?
Go ahead, Mr.
There is a, how do I say it? We imposed ourselves a not to exceed annual amount that we can issue authorizations to the general consultants. So you're a vendor and you look at the contract and you know it's a 5-year contract and you know that there's this cap put on it, so you're going to calculate what the value of that contract is. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to make a decision on, do I compete for this? Don't I compete for it? Who's the incumbent? Who's not the incumbent? There's a whole series of discussion that comes through your mind. The reason we set the caps was simply, to make sure that when we went to the 2 GEC system, because we used to only have one, that we didn't exceed, I guess, the amount of money that we were spending in a year. So we split it amongst the both. That's it. But it's exactly the same scope. It actually creates issues for us. It's created issues for us because we've imposed that artificial cap. All I'm saying is lift it. We still manage the budget through the budgeting process. We still issue the task authorizations based on the work program. So I'm just saying remove the artificial cap.
So is that a part of this motion?
I'm proposing that be part of this motion.
Well, proposed.
Actually,
Robert's
rules.
Right.
And you seconded it. And I think
amending it. Correct.
Based on.
Correct.
And then studied up on Robert's rules.
That's okay. Mr. Meyer, any other questions?
The GECB that we recently approved, that did not include the cap, or that did include the cap
yes.
restriction.
That did have the cap.
So are we unfairly providing a contract to one with a cap and the other without?
What we would have to do is go back and then bring back an item to the board to consider lifting the cap on that one as well. And that's something that would be in a separate action item.
Okay,
May I ask a question that's relevant to that?
I have a comment about that.
I was going to ask. Go ahead. You're first.
Wait. This is a procurement. We're talking about GECB that already went out for competition, and people submitted based on what they saw before them. Okay, you could have gotten more competition if they also knew that there was no cap, that it could be a potential contract, a bigger contract. So we can't do this. Okay. You can't go back after there's a winner, and now it's under negotiations, and there's going to be a signed contract, and just lift it. Either you start a fair game again, or you proceed as is. You can't do that. That's not fair. Not a fair game, and we're not going down that path. At least I don't suggest that we go down that path.
And I couldn't agree with you. Couldn't agree with you more. I had no intention of being in favor of changing GECB contract. It is what it is, and that's it. Now the question, though, however, is that we need to ask ourselves then is, by change, since we've already gone down that road with GECB, should we change or should we not change GECA and lift the cap on GECA? It's a new contract. It hasn't been bid on yet, hasn't gone out for bidding, so that's why it's here for discussion. But the question we need to ask ourselves is that something we wish to do or not do, or should we keep it consistent with the two? And that's one of the items we're talking about now. Yes, Chair Gutierrez.
I think you need to weigh what it is that's being told to us, what the purpose of this contract is for, what the task as we move forward, how is the agency moving forward, and does this cap present a handicap? I asked a very important question of staff, okay? And it wasn't just the executive director that responded, because I wanted to know more. Are we efficient by having two contracts, and do we need two contracts? I was told at this time we need two. At this time, we need two. In the near future, as we move forward, things may be different because of the work construction program. I'm listening carefully. What that means is, why do we want to go around the circle again and again when we know that things in the very near future, come next year and the year after, we may have other needs. So at this time, given that now we have this contract before us, and they are, even though the scope of work is the same, they are not the same because we do not get the same qualified individuals nor qualified construction companies, engineering companies coming into this. You won't see the same ones. For some reason, smaller companies go after B, bigger companies go after A.
What are you recommending then on the
We
cap?
lift the cap now. Now is an opportunity so we don't find ourselves in 6 months from now realizing, hey, this is hampering our ability to do what we need to do as an agency.
If I could.
Mr. Vasquez goes.
I'm 100% on board with that idea. My concern is the following. I was fine with the idea so long as we had some avenue of doing the same thing with B. I understand why we cannot. I'm clear. I was going to raise the issue, and you beat me to it. I'm clear on that.
Was I?
However, if you have a contract for A without the cap, and you continue with a contract with B with the cap, you in essence have a cap, because you are still going to be applying a cap to one of the two contracts, which in essence means you have a cap. So it's almost an exercise in futility to raise a cap if you don't eliminate it from the other contract. I just want to raise that concern.
Mr. Director, how do you feel about that, if you agree or disagree with that?
Again, if you look at the cap not to exceed, it's $10 million, correct,
Yes, sir.
Helen? And I'll ask our Director of Engineering, what's the average amount of money that we've spent on general engineering consultant over the last 5 years on an annual basis?
On an annual basis, average on both contracts, we haven't exceeded $8 million.
Again, it's an artificial cap. That's the point. The point is that it's artificial. And what I'm saying is, rather than keeping it there and creating problems potentially 3, 4, 5 years down the road, I'm saying let's take it out.
Okay.
That also allows people to say there's no cap, there might be more competition. That's the incentive from my part.
My concern that I just raised remains on the table. The fact that it's an artificial cap raises even more concerns to me, because just like we know that, our vendors know that. And so the question is, do we really have a competitive factor here if it's artificial?
Clarify artificial. Artificial is we've never met it.
I know
That's the
exactly what
point.
you're saying, but
That's
just like
what I
we know that, I would think the vendors know that as well. So where I'm going is, if we've never hit the cap, then I'm not sure we've ever lost on vendors or had a situation where vendors that would have otherwise bid on the contract without the cap, maybe. I don't know that it's come into play. That's all I'm saying.
But the response, I guess the opposite end of that is, we don't know if we lifted the cap, we don't know if that'll change either. We may end up with the same people either way, but it's a bending and changing it. Mr. Walters and then Mr. Cancio. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sat through the interviews for the GECB. And I've probably sat through more selection processes than anyone in this room. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure I have, because that's what I do for a living for the last 15 years. And I'd kind of like to share my observations with you. I think in any kind of competition, whether it's electing a president, electing a mayor, selecting a consultant, the incumbent always has an advantage. That's just human nature. I think when you impose a rigid cone of silence on top of a selection process, that reinforces the incumbent's advantage. He's over here every day. He's rubbing shoulders. As a matter of fact, the chairwoman mentioned before, they're staff. They're an extension of staff. So it's another built-in advantage. That's okay. That's the way it is. That's the way the world works. But the process that I saw, which was essentially a bunch of, in my mind, gotcha questions. I didn't hear a single question about project approach. I didn't hear a single question about the table of organization. I didn't hear a single question about how will your team improve efficiencies at MDX. And I heard hypothetical questions. I heard, questions that I didn't think were germane. I asked a staff member what was the purpose of this type of process, and I was told, well, we want to see how they think on their feet. Well, I think the ability to think on your feet is great if you're a contestant on Jeopardy, but I prefer my design consultants to be analytical, deliberative, and I just didn't see that this process really, I have no complaints with who was selected. I have a problem with how we got there. I also have a problem with the composition of the selection committee. If I remember correctly, the two non-MDX board members had 55-point swings in their scores, 55 points each. The MDX members, who basically are here, they're the ones going to be held accountable whether this program succeeds or fails. People from outside, program goes south, no skin off their back. But their scores were between 5 points and I believe 30 points, separating the high from the low, much closer. So in essence, the two outsiders picked the GEC. That's what it boils down to. I have no problem with using outsiders, but I prefer to keep the outsiders to people that are somehow part of this community, that are users of the system. I would rather see somebody from the Chamber of Commerce, Transportation Committee on the selection committee. They're big advocates of improving mobility. Why not get them involved? I'd like to see somebody from the West Kendall Homeowners Association on the selection committee. They complain about the tolls. Let's bring them in and get them to participate. I'm sure I have some other thoughts, but I just wanted to share my observations with you.
We appreciate all of those thoughts, sir, and it's an interesting thing. What do you say about changing what's the position of staff on changing the setup of the tech team committee? Right. Let's start with that one, then we'll go to the second one.
I've always been in favor that the authority, because we live with these contracts, should have a majority. And your observations are similar to mine observations when I looked at it. Again, if we're going to make changes to the composition, this is the time to do it. The composition for GECB was selected, it was agreed upon, and we live with the results. Now we're analyzing those results. That's why I brought it up. Should the composition be the same? Should it change? Should it be 4-1? Should the member from outside be somebody in the community? My argument to a chamber or something like that is, are they qualified or do they have conflicts? That's the thing, because of the consulting community. But I would say that personally, I think it should be a District 6 or a Miami-Dade County person who's going to live with the results and the outcome. So I agree with that part of it. So from my perspective, I still think we should have an outside person, but maybe it should be a 4-1 or maybe a 3-1 split so that the outside doesn't control the outcome like what happened in B. As far as the questions, you're correct. I think the question should be germane in the oral. I think the proposal, I think the way the proposal is put together addresses all the questions you have, and I think a lot more questions should be asked based on the proposal, specific proposal.
Well, in particular, I've worked with a number of firms that have put these proposals together, and I know how time-consuming and expensive they are. Those proposals that were submitted, they cost $20,000, $30,000 to prepare.
More.
I know I'm being on the conservative side, but I read a newspaper article and I have questions, and I couldn't believe that 5 members on the selection committee had no questions on anything in any of the proposals.
I think it's interesting that one of the things that I recall from, and I think that's where Chair Gutierrez is talking about having the proposals done to the entire operations committee, and as well as every member of the board that wishes to participate, is you'll get those type of questions, and if from instead of having just one oversight, you'll have other members who will think of those things that perhaps those on the technical committee didn't think of. So I strongly agree with Chair Gutierrez that we need to expand the oversight on this particular contract, to have the entire operations committee to add that element of questions that others may not have thought of to ask in that type of situation. I also agree with you on the idea of we should possibly, I still strongly feel we should need to have an outside voting member. I think that's very important. But I think it should be local. I'm not sure if, and this is no knock on the Tampa-Hillsborough Expressway Authority representative, I'm sure they're doing an excellent job, but they're not from down here, so they don't know what our issues are and what they're not. I think a member of either the District 6, as you suggested, or Miami-Dade Transit would be more, or their department would be more beneficial to us because of that. That is a way we can keep it local. We can keep it home, and they'll understand and they'll know the players more completely. Do we need 2, or do we need 1 person as an outsider? But what's the consensus? I think 1 is enough. How does everyone feel about that? What was the question? Do we need 2 people that are not members on the technical committee right now? It's set up for 2. Do we need? You brought this up, so we all have discussed it. Do you think? Four from inside and 1 from outside?
I have no objections to any number from the outside, right. But I think that they should either be, involved. They need to be users of the system.
Then to follow up on that, the only issue is how difficult would it be for us to get 2 people locally to be able to sit through the technical committee evaluation? Would that be an issue, or could we do with 2?
We would have to contact Florida DOT District 6, and we would have to contact Miami-Dade County and see if we can get them. In the past, when we've set up these committees and we've had 2, and if we can only get 1, we'll come back to the board and say, look, we were only able to get 1, and we'll tell you who that person was. So I think you err on the side of caution. Give us the ability to get local. I think that's important. And if we can't get the right person with the qualifications necessary, we'll come and tell you. Okay. It's happened in the past.
So is that a suggested amendment? Mr. Gonzalez.
I agree with what's been said. I think we need to keep something in mind. These outside people give us new thoughts, new ideas. It makes it a fair process for those that want to compete, because of a lot of what Cliff brought up in terms of, I'm used to working with this company, I don't want to work with X company. I do think they should be local people, but they need to be local people who understand the technical side of this deal. Because just because I use the system doesn't mean I get to select a good contractor. Maybe in some other bid, that would be a good idea, but not in something like this, which is very, very technical. So I like to make sure that's the case. And by the way, if we're worried that any vote would skew the final result, the way to do it is to have ordinal scoring where you eliminate the lowest and the highest. And that way you get a fair scoring of the whole process. If I'm, 50 points, as was said, different from the rest, then my score won't be counted. And that's something we may want to consider. I know Miami-Dade County does it in their contracts, and what it does is sort of takes out those outliers.
Mr. Cancio, I know you've been waiting patiently. I apologize. Please.
I am not in this committee, but only I want to make a comment. If we have one contract with a cap and we want to have the other without cap, why don't we wait for 6 months to have both without cap? In that way, we don't going to have any problem at this time.
Mr. Casio, it's the other way around. We already advertised the other one with the cap, and we already selected it, and we're finalizing the agreement with them. This one has a cap, that currently has a cap. We're going to be advertising it and hopefully selecting somebody in January. What we're saying is remove the cap from this one, but you can't go in the rears. I think that's what the committee was saying. You can't go in the rears.
Okay, so I have had a couple of suggestions here, and I want to make sure if I've forgotten any, I apologize. One suggestion to amend is to lift the cap on the arbitrary cap that we have currently, to require the same makeup of the technical evaluation committee insofar as 4 members from MDX and 2 outsiders, however, that the outsiders be local, 1 from District 6 and 1 from Miami-Dade County. That's number 2. The third suggestion is from Mr. Gonzalez in the evaluation to throw out the highest and lowest numbers, and that was a suggestion. I'm not saying it's an amendment that's been brought forth. That's another amendment. Am I missing any so far? Have I gotten pretty much all of them so far? Chair Gutierrez, yes.
Very important, and this is the topic of discussion that occurred last time at OPS based on Rick Pena, is that we need to add something to the criteria, the scoring, that it needs to be totally objective. Even though almost everything is objective, is as simple as this, okay? What are you going to do differently? What else do you bring to the table that we're not looking at? Any added value to the table? By going with you, what do we win? What else is there for us by going with you? And I think, and I don't know if it's possible, there should be a weight that is given to that. And that's something subject to, depending on if it's meaningful, if it's of value, that they win that number. And maybe that's exactly what gets them to win the contract. Because this is the problem that I'm having. You bellyache at the end, and I'm going to use that word today. You bellyache, you whine that you don't like something, but you don't make the change when you need to make the change. So since I am one that whine and continue to whine, I'm going to go in and say, now is the time to do it, not after the fact. Let's do it now. Let's add that. So it's not more of the same. And it doesn't matter who at the end wins it, the most qualified, the one that crossed the T's and dot their I's. But the bottom line is you want to know more. And is there something that you can gain by them giving you for MDX that is of value as substance, and you do it now by adding it in?
Mr. Vasquez.
I'm sorry. Is that the kind of information you can request during the orals upon questioning, or should that be a term of the procurement?
It has to be in the procurement. It's very similar, and I think that's why we're having this debate. It's very similar to what Mr. Rodriguez Pena asked during the GCB, where he wanted evaluation criteria on innovation as it related to technology. I think what I'm hearing here is under the same innovation component, value-added services.
Uniqueness. Now,
something of that nature, but it has to be set up from the beginning. It can't be something that you evaluate arbitrarily at the end.
Would that be, I remember when Board Member Rodriguez Pena mentioned it, my only reservation about the idea, as much as I liked it, was how broad of a term would that be? How undefined of a term would that be to where you're asking for what makes you different? Kind of questioning, is that, maybe perhaps I can turn to procurement and legal staff, is that something that would be too wide open for, as a defined term of an RFP?
No, we can couch it so that we can draft language that would get us what we need and is fair to the proposers.
Fine with that. And then when among your list of ideas or proposals, did you include the one of going back to the way we had it before that the chair suggested?
No, I was going to add that. That was one I was also going to be including that as well. Yes. Okay. Mr. Rodriguez
Chair?
Pena.
I'm keeping track of this. You want me to give you what I got? I have 7 different ideas that crossed through, and maybe you can I know you're trying to run the meeting, but I've been back here writing them down. Okay.
I accept all assistance in every aspect.
Okay.
Right ahead.
Help you out a little bit. Number one, the rigid code of silence that Mr. Walters brought up. 2, composition of the tech committee. 3, the oversight, expand the oversight committee to complete all. 4, the caps. 5 would be to add a term, a value-added term, an objective term. And that's what I thought.
Right. Yes, sir.
I have no objection to the cone of silence.
No, I know that, and that's
it
why
was an observation.
what I brought up. No. And that's one of the reasons why, if you notice, where council and I differed in what we had was the cone of silence. When I knew from the way you were describing it, that's something we're not going to lift. So go ahead, Mr. Rodriguez-Pina.
Just to recap, I guess it's our notes to make sure we're all saying the same thing. We have the local participation. The local participation will be one of the components, the lifting of the cap, the full ops committee, the potentially scoring, throwing out the scoring. That's a recommendation by Mr. Gonzalez. And then the objective category, which we really encourage people to participate. Let me talk about that one as one that kind of initiated that thinking. You know, I think we are ultimately held to our decisions publicly. So everything that happens here, we're held accountable, the good, the bad, and in between. So even as far as selecting vendors, and particularly this is an extension. This is an extension, absolutely. This is such a critical component. I think that the objective category needs to be large enough to say, you know, we as the board, our 13 board members, feel that the technical evaluation committee said this, but you know what? We don't have to be held to that. You know, we can objectively say this is in our best interest, and for a myriad of reasons. So I think that objective message needs to be sent out. Let me refine my statement. I think by sending out a strong message to say, incumbent, you know, you're not guaranteed anything. Everybody that comes in here needs to bring their A game, and anybody that brings innovative ideas will be considered. And that, I think, goes to some neutralizing of the equal playing field. So I think that should be a large enough scoring that we can look at where the subjectivity or objectivity is infused, because ultimately we're held accountable to our decisions. And what I found myself being locked into this box, and we couldn't get out of this box, and we're the policymakers. And I think we need to give ourselves some latitude. It lends itself to potentially being abused, but I think it also lends itself to hurting us. And I think it is reflective of the board members, the integrity of these board members, that I believe we need to have that latitude in order to be able to assert the vision, what we believe is best for this community, what we believe based on our collective knowledge and the reasons we're appointed here as volunteers. You know, we don't have a gain other than to do what is right. I think that is a critical component. So with that, I'll end.
Mr. Walters, yes.
Well, I certainly agree with those points, but I think if we're serious about showing that the incumbent is not necessarily how would you say, have an inside track, we've got to look at the scoring criteria. 500 out of 1,000 points is knowledge and understanding of the authority. If you're already here doing it, that's 500 points you're starting with. I mean, you're halfway there.
Okay. So, what is your recommendation, that's a good point, what was your recommendation based on your comments?
Thank you. That we do have a category in the scoring criteria that allows that, why are you different? What do you bring to this organization that is not necessarily the cookie cutter? Okay, yeah, you can cut the cookie, but what else can you do for us? And I think that value added, if you can, the example I think I used before, if we're looking for an electrician and that electrician can do plumbing, well, that's a greater value added to this organization. But if you're only looking for an electrician and you can do drywall and other, we can't use you.
and we've limited ourselves to the capabilities. So I think we need to give ourselves, Mr. Chair, a criteria scoring that needs to be able to significantly give an advantage to a entity that brings us greater value. By, again, the analogy of being a plumber, electrician, and drywall installer, well, that's what we want for the same price. I think it's a great opportunity. Yeah, so do I, by the way. But that's my point. So the scoring criteria.
Mr. Director.
For clarification purposes, Board Member Rodriguez Pena, we can couch criteria and weight it as on the wishes of this committee. We'll give it the way that the committee wishes for innovation and value added to the scope, but we do have to tie it to the scope. And so when you use that analogy, which is, I just want to put it on the record, if we're looking for an electrician and the scope of services is for electrical services, the fact that this proposer is a plumber, we're not going to give him credit for that because that does not help the scope. So we need to couch it within the scope of.
Understood. But I think there's a way to do this.
Yes, there is a way of doing it. I just want to make sure that it's clear.
I'm hearing carefully what board members are proposing, and Chairwoman Gutierrez actually brought something up that we've done in other procurements. There's a way to neutralize whether you're the incumbent or not the incumbent. And one of those ways is if we develop the criteria that talks about value-added services and how we're going to evaluate that, maybe the way to do it is to develop a hypothetical task, a hypothetical situation that is germane to general engineering services, the scope of work services, and ask them to tell us how they would handle that task. And that evaluates not only how their team's going to work together, but how they're going to, attack it from different angles. You'll be able to decide how this team, this extension of your staff, addresses a particular issue. And maybe that is the subject of questions during an oral presentation or an oral discussion that, again, teases out, why is it that you think like this? Why is it that you think that the solution to this particular task or situation needed to go that route? And I mean, that's another way of doing it that sticks with the scope of work and captures the value added that they could bring to the table. It's an idea.
So
Let me
go ahead,
because you're providing a dilemma.
Right.
And a real service that at that point you see how they handle the problem. And what innovative ideas do they add to it? That lets you look into their analytical thinking. And how will they step up in case of a situation, or how they're going to handle their job.
Mr. Vasquez.
With a vote today to approve the advertisement of RFP for GECA, are we already authorizing, or I'm sure this will then go to the full board, correct?
No.
It goes.
It stays here in this committee.
Okay, so that means at that point we've authorized staff to proceed with the RFP ad.
Correct.
Some of these things that we're talking about, including the objective factor, is it going to come back to us one more time before we advertise?
Well, I think this is a great question, which is why I think at this point we're at an interesting crossroads because we've discussed a lot of items.
If I could just finish my thought.
I thought you were done. I apologize.
I am sensing a lot of discomfort. Okay?
I was going to go.
And whether it's discomfort about how things went about in B, or whether it's discomfort about our system and where it's going with A, I'm sensing some discomfort. I'm not prepared to vote in approval of advertising this RFP without having a better understanding of what that objective factor is going to look like, having an opinion from our legal staff about it. I'm hearing something from somebody that has a lot of experience in this capacity, which just brought to my attention about 50% of this scoring really benefiting the incumbent. That raises real concerns to me. So since at least I can advocate my discomfort, I'm sensing more discomfort, I'm just saying this thing has to come back before we should take that vote.
You stole my thunder, Mr. Vasquez. I was going to suggest immediately that this was not even close to ripe for a vote today on this item. We've brought up at least 7 different things we'd like to change to the contract, and making amendments on the fly is for such an important contract would not be appropriate. So what I suggest we do is this. Actually, I think what we can do is we can take a vote to the motion. It will not pass. And Council, what is the best way to handle this?
Yeah, there's several ways, and Board Member Vasquez just said one. You can postpone it to the next one, or you can vote not to pass it.
I would prefer, and this is my opinion, I would prefer to not pass it for one reason, because my understanding is if it's tabled, it stays the way it is now, and we cannot we're going to go through the amendment process, or how does that work?
I would recommend that we've had there was a motion, there was a second, as it was last time. There's been a lot of discussion on things that you would like us to address. And I think all you have to do is instruct us to bring back to you this item at the next meeting, addressing all of those items specifically and how we will address it in the contract. And then at that point, you could take the item up again and vote on it.
That's fine. As long as council's comfortable with whatever procedure we do, I'm fine with that. Mr. Holland, yes.
Again, I'm not a part of the committee either, but I want to at least express a few things.
But you're an important member of our board, and we value your opinion.
In fact, I pretty much agree with almost everything that's been said, but I don't want us to lose sight, because I think sometimes in these discussions, there's innuendo that is there that I think is probably misplaced, because I don't think it was intended. I don't think we've ever picked a bad GEC since we've been here. We've always had great GECs. I think this is about how do you fine-tune this process, one, to make sure you get greater competition, and two, to get a better product. So I just want to clarify that on the record so people don't think we're saying that there was something that was sinister that went on before and we didn't have a good, clean process before.
No. I agree with you.
Secondly, I agree with, I think it was Mr. Cancio and Mr. Walters, and there was someone else who mentioned, Board Member Gonzalez, who mentioned I still want to have some technical expertise in this evaluation while also reserving some portion of consideration by this board who ultimately is going to be held responsible for the GEC. And so I don't know when the director knows come back with their recommendation, if there is some way of giving the TEC with these added members that we talked about that are technically proficient, but at the same time, I guess, understanding of the local system, if they can have some evaluation of it, and that's sealed, and then it comes to the board for a percentage of points for the other evaluation on the hybrid question that was possibly posed, and we can go back and forth on that, and then we evaluate them and rank them on that, and then you combine those two scores to come up with what you perceive as the highest ranked vendor at that point. And I think that also takes out any concern that people may have that it was directed one way or the other towards an incumbent or what have you. I also do think maybe we look at the evaluative points and kind of reshuffle that deck to give us a better process as well. But I do think we're on the right track of making sure we at least enhance this system. Now, whether or not, and I missed this part of the discussion, if we remove this cap, I don't know if we have not had people apply because they say this $10 million cap that we have on there is not enough. I think there are a lot of engineering companies that are looking for work that are pretty good at what they do and do the things that we want them to do. I don't know if that has become a marketplace cry or whether or not it's something that's more perceived by us that they may not want it because it's not big enough. Typically, in my experience, and Cliff may have had some of the same experience as some of the others, a lot of times you get a more vibrant, robust pool of people participating when they truly believe there's a process put together that gives a very open look at the competition and it's not kind of decked against them. Because I've had people oftentimes say, well, this is not necessarily here, but just even in other governmental procurements. You know, I know that the way this is written is like it's leaning towards, so why do I spend $20,000, $30,000 to compete? And I think if we look at some sort of hybrid approach, that may give people this perception that, because perception is reality in most cases, that it is a very open and robust competition, and therefore they'll probably be willing to put those resources behind a competition.
Yes, Mr. Meyer.
I'd like to make two suggestions. The first is related to the criteria because I share many of the same sentiments as my fellow board members with respect to creating an open, transparent, but more importantly, competitive process. For item number 3, that's 500 points, knowledge and understanding of the authority. I think very simple modifications can be made as far as not only the title of that point allocation and just knowledge and understanding of tolling processes. And as you go through each item A through G, there are certain elements that are open to tolling agencies and your understanding of different aspects of tolling agencies. And there are cases where it specifically refers to the MDX system. But if you utilize 3A and that 150 points is allocated towards the understanding of the MDX system and those related elements in the bullets, that could account for that criteria in understanding the MDX system, and it's for each proposer to do their due diligence, whether they've worked with us or not, to come up with their best solutions and understanding. And then B through G can just be their understanding of tolling agencies and how they've dealt in these situations or with these situations in past experiences. That would be my initial recommendation to look at. Secondly, there's been tremendous discourse regarding this from the front to the back cover. Is there an opportunity to establish a special operations committee meeting prior to our next committee meeting, at which time we would expect to approve this GECA to go out to the market, so that we can have that open discussion, dialogue, and discourse for then staff to take all of those comments or recommendations back to fully vet them and come up with a plan before our next operations committee meeting?
Well, I think that's an excellent idea. And staff and a member of the committee, I think we should have some type, because there's been an extensive amount of stuff discussed. And I don't believe that we should just allow staff to change the contract, make the changes, and then come back and discuss it some more after everyone's had a chance to process all this. So, Mr. Director, what do you think about scheduling a special operations meeting, not on an action item, though, on it, or an ad hoc, or an operation? No, an ops committee. No, I want to do it. No, I want it to be an ops meeting. No, I want it to be an operations meeting. But instead of having it being brought just dedicated to the contract, instead of having other items, and having it instead of for an action to vote on it, but to discuss it and then set it for a further ops meeting to actually vote on it, is what I'm suggesting.
If I may interject.
Maybe we're going to.
If I have.
Just suggesting.
If I may interject.
We're suggesting we're talking about it.
If I may interject. We've listened. We're audio recording this. We understand what the committee members are saying.
Okay.
We understand, and AJ, you made a really good point about how we can generalize some of these items that isn't specific to MDX. What I would recommend to this committee is that give us a chance to put this together.
Do it that way.
Give us a chance to put this item back together, addressing all of your items, and we'll bring it to the operations committee. We'll have a full discussion there, and if it's prepared, you vote on it. If it's not prepared, you send us back to the drawing table. But I would prefer,
Let's do it that way.
I always prefer that these conversations happen at committee.
Of course.
It's the right thing to do.
And so then from what I'm hearing from the committee is that we table this item for now. Staff goes back with all the recommendations and the input that they've received. It's been brought before us to the next operations committee meeting, and at that time we can make a decision if we're comfortable with the changes, and if we're not, we can move forward from there. Does anyone on this, is the committee, operations committee, comfortable with that approach to this matter? So I am moving. Do I need a vote to move, or can I move it as a chairman discretion?
To the next meeting.
I am deferring the item from the chair. I am deferring the item to the next operations committee for staff to be inputting all of the recommendations and information that we've presented. Is there anyone on the committee that is in objection to my deferring the item? Hearing none, that's the suggestion that we defer this to the next operations. Very good. Moving on to the next item, action item D.
MDX procurement contract RFP 16-01. Inspection and reporting services for MDX structures. $4,650,000 is the estimate. Approval to advertise a request for proposal.
In presentation for
Committee members, this is the RFP to select the firms that do our structural inspections on the bridges that we are currently operating and are under our jurisdiction. The two contracts that we currently have are expiring, and we need to re-procure this to meet our federal requirements on bridge reporting. The reason we have two contractors is because we go through a biannual cycle on all the bridges. Primarily, the way we've been dealing with these contracts is that in one cycle, one of the firms will get the majority of the inspections, and the second firm will do the verification testing. And then during the second biannual cycle, we flip who does the responsibilities to distribute the work evenly. The contract is 4 years so that we can go through two biannual cycles with two-year options on the contract. And I'll answer any questions.
any questions from the committee? Ms. Chair Gutierrez.
Thank you. So this is like a pool.
It is a pool.
Okay. And the submitters, can one team have the same group from the other team, or they have to be distinctively different?
I believe we have it so that they're different.
Absolutely different from top to bottom?
They need to be different because they're doing check and balance on each other.
Okay. Very good. No, just making sure, because bridge inspection is very important. We want to continue to be at the top of being the most safe bridges.
And just for the record, we're also approving the Technical Evaluation Committee composition with a board member oversight. Rick Johnson, our Operations and Maintenance Manager, Ted Colwell, which is our GIS and Structures Manager, who they'll be overseeing this contract, and also a DOT or Turnpike representative.
Very good. Mr. Walters? I will appoint I would like Mr. Walters to be assigned as the oversight for this contract. Well, assuming that it's approved, I'm getting ahead of myself. I apologize for that. Does anyone wish to move the item? So moved by Chair Gutierrez, seconded by Mr. Gonzalez. We've had discussion on the item. Discussion is closed. Anyone in opposition to this item? Hearing no opposition, the item is approved unanimously. And now I'm appointing Mr. Walters as the oversight on this committee. Next action item, Council.
Item E, MDX Work Program number 87410, State Road 874 ramp connector to Southwest 128th Street. Endorsement of eminent domain parcel resolution number 1517.
And who is going to present for staff? Mr. Toledo?
Yes, committee members. In accordance with the resolution that we passed in December for the project for 87410, the 874 ramp connector to Southwest 28th Street, this is the eminent domain parcel resolutions which allow us now to go in and acquire the needed parcels either by negotiated conveyance or eminent domain. What we do now is that with the approval of this parcel, we enter into negotiations for the parcels that we need. If negotiations fail, then we would enter into eminent domain, but only if negotiations fail. This is similar to other resolutions that we've already approved through this committee and the board.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Hearing no questions, does anyone wish to move the item? Moved by Mr. Meyer, seconded by Mr. Gonzalez. We've had discussion. Discussion is closed. Anyone have any opposition to the item? Hearing no opposition, the item passes unanimously. All the informational items.
To make it really quick, item A, which is a list of NDX parcels that are leased as of June 2015, is for your information. Any questions that you have on any of this, please contact us. Contact me and contact Jason Green, who oversees this. But I think what we've done is we've made it as comprehensive as possible so that all the board members know all the parcels that are currently leased. as of June 2015.
Thank you. And Mr. Walters, while you were away, I appointed you the oversight to action item D, which is a contract. You're going to be the board oversight on that. Congratulations. That's what happens. That's what happens when you step out. Correct. No other items. And before I adjourn, I just want to say I'd really like to thank the members of the board who are not members of the committee who came here today. We got some great information today from those members, and I really appreciate their input and their participation. Other than that, we have our announcements coming forward. We have our Think Big subcommittee meeting right after this, and we have several other meetings coming up. Anyone wish to move to adjourn? Move to adjourn. It's adjourned. Thank you all again.